I love the Piedmont Road congregation. Can I just tell you, having been gone for the past two Sundays and being back this morning, I felt a little bit like a kid. As I walked around and all the smiles and all the different people just with the warm hugs and the welcome homes and the we've been praying for you, I can't tell you how much it meant and how good it is to be home. And I'm excited tonight to be able to stand before you and share a little bit about our trip. Before we get into the slides, though, I want to take you back to September of 1966. Now, I can't personally take you back that far, but in your minds, I want you to go back there if you can. New television series hits the airways, and it chronicled the missions of a team of secret government agents known as the Impossible Missions Force, or IMF. Some of you may already know the show I'm referring to. A hallmark of the series was the opening, and the team was led by a man named Dan Briggs, and the show would open with Dan getting the assignment from a hidden tape recorder and an envelope that had photos and different things about the mission in it. And the tape would begin good morning or afternoon or evening, whatever the appropriate time of day would be, Mr. Briggs. Then it would explain the situation, give them a little bit of detail, and it would say, your mission, Dan, should you decide to accept it, followed by a brief explanation of the mission, and then the tape would self-destruct. Now, the title of the show was Mission Impossible. And we know that that show would also inspire a series of movies with Tom Cruise that began in 1996. So it's a famous show and more modern through the movies that Tom Cruise did. But you know, if you stop and think about it, you and I have a mission as well. The Lord, right before His ascension in Mark chapter 16, verses 15 and 16 said, go into all the world and preach the gospel. He that believes and is baptized will be saved. He who does not believe will be condemned. You and I have a mission. Our mission is to go into all the world and preach. The method by which Jesus gave to proclaim that message of salvation. Our message, though, unlike the TV show, is not going to self-destruct. Our message is indestructible. It has withstood the test of time, and it will continue to withstand the test of time as long as the earth will last. So in essence, our mission is possible, not impossible. But if you notice the mission that was given to us, it doesn't have borders. It begins in our home and it goes forward out our front door to the uttermost parts of the earth. Our mission. And so it was for Neil and Peyton and Ashley and myself and Carrie Oglesby. We had the opportunity to take that mission into Tanzania in 2014. So on Thursday, September the 18th, we stood at Atlanta International Airport, minus Carrie, he's not there yet, ready to board a flight to Amsterdam. So our travels took us from Atlanta to Amsterdam, which was about an 8 to 9 hour flight. We had about a 2-hour layover in Amsterdam. And then from Amsterdam, we traveled to Kilimanjaro, which was roughly about a 9 to 10 hour flight. And I want to share with you a little bit about what Tanzania is like. So Tanzania is located on the eastern part of Africa right here. Now, a lot in the news about Ebola. We had a lot of questions about that. Are you guys going to be okay? The majority of the Ebola cases are on the western part over here. So roughly speaking, distance-wise, and it's not maybe captured as well here, roughly from the eastern part to the western part of the continent is equal to roughly the distance from California to Atlanta. So that's about how far away most of the cases are. So you can notice on the globe there, the equator, Tanzania is a little bit south of the equator. Now, if you look a little bit more specifically at Tanzania itself, we flew into Kilimanjaro right there. Arusha, which would be the largest city that we were close to, would be right in this area here, roughly. And then we were in the village of Kasongo for most of our time there. Tanzania is slightly larger than twice the size of California, just to put it in perspective. Its population has roughly 40 million people from a population perspective. The predominant means of income would be tourism, probably, as far as people going into Kilimanjaro. And certainly two of the main reasons would be climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, but then there's also another mountain called Mount Meru. Now, we did get one picture of Kilimanjaro from where we were. Didn't turn out well enough to put in the slides, but this is a picture of Mount Meru. So we could see this every day from where we were in Kasongo. What's interesting about Mount Meru is it's a dormant volcano. So it last erupted in, I think it was 1898, if I'm not mistaken. This would be the front of the mountain. The back of the mountain is where the volcano erupted and blew out the last time, and they said it's estimated that it lost around anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 feet of elevation the last time it erupted. So as a dormant volcano, it's possible that it could erupt again. They do get activity as far as rumblings and stuff like that, but it's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful scenery, as you can tell. Now, to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Meru, from my understanding, roughly, I think the ascent up for either one of those is somewhere around the 3-day point. It can be done somewhere in that time frame. And then the ascension down is roughly 2 to 3 days, and you can do longer or shorter. But that's a major aspect of why tourism would come into Kilimanjaro, Tanzania. Another one would be safaris. There are probably at least 4 that I can think of, maybe 5 major places for safaris while you're in Tanzania. And we flew in on Friday, got in about 9:30 at night, and then Saturday, to help as our bodies got acclimated to the area, we were able to go on one of those safaris. And you can see that the country itself is very beautiful. There's more greenery. This is the beginning of the dry season, more greenery than you would expect. You can get a glimpse from this next slide. You can see that dry riverbed during the rainy season. It would be full of water. And this is on the game preserve where we were. Now, the preserve where we were located at was known, the name of the preserve was Serengeti, and it was primarily known for elephants. So we saw a number of elephants. It was amazing. And you can see these elephants here. If you can see from the picture, one of the things you can notice is their trunks down in that sand. And what they would do is they would dig out in the sand to get to water, stick their trunks down in there to drink the water. And I don't even know how many elephants we probably saw. It would probably be close to 100. Several giraffes. I like this picture because he's kind of looking at you like, really, you're taking my picture? I just want to eat lunch, please. But the elephants were one of the key parts. Now, as you can tell, this is one of the baby elephants. Now, with a baby elephant, a mama's not too far behind, and this would be mama elephant. Now, the safari trucks that were in, they're Range Rovers, is what they were, but the tops of them lift up and elevate where you can actually stand up and look out of them. So in this particular picture, we were taking some pictures. You had the driver in the front seat, Carrie Oglesby right beside him. Then Neil and I would have been behind them, and then Peyton and Ashley behind us. Carrie was looking towards the front at the mama elephant. Neil was more towards the back taking a picture. Well, Mama's walking towards us, and Carrie was starting to get a little bit nervous about Mama elephant coming to us and is asking the driver, is this safe? Well, Mama got a little closer. You can see the hood of the car right there. And Neil had his back turned and couldn't figure out exactly what Carrie was talking about. And Carrie finally said, is this safe? And Neil turned around and said, oh, that elephant. So it was pretty good. But it's amazing. I mean, they came all around, but left right after that part. Some zebras as well. A baboon taking a rest in a tree. And I have to admit, I had more fun laughing at this. If you've ever heard baboons, they bark kind of like a dog. So you had the tree surrounded by elephants, and these baboons kind of barking at each other, and for some reason it just struck me as funny. So we sat there for a little while and watched that. But one of the highlights was getting to see, obviously, the king of the jungle. Now, I have to tell a little story around this as well. So when we first got there, we were about 10 to 15 feet away from this lion, and it wouldn't look at us. So we were trying everything we could to get it to look at us, and I'll give you one guess what the first thing we tried was. That didn't work. So the second thing we tried was we had some leftover food from our picnic lunch, and they were some peanuts. So Neil thought it would be a good idea to throw some peanuts at the lion to try to get it to turn. So Neil threw some peanuts out, but half of them made it out, and half of them hit the roof of the thing and rained down on us. But it did get the lion to turn his head. And you can see from this picture here, about a 3 to 4 year old male one of the things that was most fascinating to me from this picture is you can see some of the scars on its face from the fighting. But it was absolutely amazing. And I couldn't help but be reminded when you think about the scenery, you think about these animals, of Paul's words in Romans chapter 1, verse 20, that we really are without excuse. You think about the creation that God has made. You think about what we enjoy here, what we were able to experience on a whole other continent. And it truly is amazing, God's creation. And we were able to experience a little bit of that. But there are other aspects of the culture as well. If you look into city life, so Arusha was the main town that we were closest to. We were outside of Arusha in a village called Kasango. So as you go into town, this is a common scene as you travel along the roads leading from Kasango into Arusha, the closer you get into Arusha. What you see here are just a series of shops, multiple shops within these little kind of like strip stands where they might sell anything from drinks to roasted corn to cell phone minutes, if you need to get some cell phone minutes, but just a wide variety of items that they sell. And these just line the street on both sides. Now you can catch a glimpse in this picture if you look right over here. You'll see two Muslim women, which is not uncommon. So if you look at the breakdown religiously of the country, about 62% would claim to be quote-unquote Christian of some capacity. 35% would be Muslim. Especially the more you get into the city of Arusha, that becomes a little bit of a more common sight. Again, more of the shops, as you can see, some of the business. Now, this picture I included, and I don't know if you can tell. Can you tell from the picture what's in those crates? Chickens. So some of the folks closer can tell. I don't even know how many chickens were in this particular picture with these crates. But the reason I put this picture in here is, one of the things that was interesting to me this time as I talked to the missionary families was to understand a little bit more about their expenses as they're there. So if you were to go to the store, and that's where the majority of these chickens were probably going to end up, and buy a small chicken to cook, it would cost about $10 to $12 for that chicken, which quite a bit more expensive than what we would pay here in the U.S. And what one of the missionaries was telling me is, it's interesting. It's very cheap to eat healthy over there. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, things of that nature, very inexpensive. And you can eat healthy. But if you want other items that would be more common here, it becomes much more expensive. Like a can of refried beans would be about $5. So processed foods, canned foods, they become much more expensive, but the fresher vegetables, fruits, they're much more reasonable. Now, as you look at this picture, one of the things I wanted to point out is, if you look at the motorcycles that you see right here, those are what are called piki-pikis. And what they are basically a means of transportation, so a taxi service, so to speak. Now, a person would pay 2,000 to 3,000 shillings, which would be somewhere around $1 to $2, to ride one of those through town. Now, at first glance, you look at that and you think, well, that seems pretty reasonable, not too bad, until you get a better sense of the traffic. So that's the picture out of the windshield of one of our missionaries as we were going into Arusha. Now, the other vehicle you see in front of us right here, that's called a dolly dolly. Now, that's another form of transportation and taxi. And the general saying is, basically, there's always room for one more. I've seen people literally hanging off the back, holding onto the sides, strapped to the sides, holding onto the windows. There's no limit. You don't have to have a seatbelt for everybody that's on one of these. Let's just say that. So now imagine that piki-piki swerving in and out of this area here, or on the side here, literally within 3 or 4 inches of your car. That's constant at all times going on around you. But also throw into the mix civilians crossing the road. And you can notice here, there's a lane, there's a lane, there's a lane, and there's a lane, but it's only a 2-lane road. So there's no sense of where people are. And the only way I know to describe it, do you remember the video game Frogger? That's basically what it's like, is you've got people darting in and out, you've got these motorcycles coming all around, you've got cars that could pass you on either side, and then you're driving on the wrong side of the road. So it becomes a very interesting means when in regards to transportation. And it's one of the most unique parts of the trip to get used to. The first time you go and you ride with the missionaries, you literally start praying because you think, I might meet the Lord before we get to the next stop. But it's amazing. They become, it's their culture. And the other thing is they don't have road rage. People don't get mad. It's not personal. It's just common. That's how they drive. It's just part of the culture. So it's a very interesting experience, the transportation. But I'll tell you, the people are amazing. Uh, the people are very warm, very open, very kind. Uh, as I mentioned, they don't take things personal, even the traffic, as difficult as it might be. As people, what you would think are cutting you off, it's not. That's just part of the process. And out in the villages, as you go to study, and I'll talk about this a little bit more as we go on, they're always open. We didn't have one person the whole week that said, no, I'm not going to take the time to talk to you. It's a very, very warm and welcoming culture. Again, another picture, a view out the windshield there of the traffic. I put this picture in just because I thought it was interesting. It's a third world country, but if you look at the picture, what you see is the words in Swahili are right there in the middle of Facebook. The Western culture is starting to influence this area as well. And one of the things you're starting to see more and more of is that Western influence. So for some reason, when I saw this, it struck me as kind of comical. Is you're in the middle of this country and in the city, and there you go, Facebook is right there. Let me share with you a little bit about the mission, though, in Tanzania. So our work was part of a broader campaign that's been going on for quite a few years that's known as Tanzania 2000. Now, this is a 20-year plan that began with a missionary by the name of Cy Stafford. It was overseen originally by the Kensington Woods congregation out of Mississippi. This mission, though, is now under the oversight of the Bear Valley congregation in Denver, Colorado. And a key component of their oversight is the Bear Valley Bible Institute. As part of their mission, they have a plan that looks 50 years into the future where they want to establish, I believe it's 50 schools of preaching across the world. And as we go through the presentation, you'll understand a little bit more about their involvement here in Africa. But the oversight of the mission now is under the Bear Valley congregation. So this mission has built Bible schools in Arusha and Moshi. It has built a preacher training program in Kasongo that we'll talk more about in a minute. And it continues for the purpose of strengthening the congregations, enabling them to be self-supporting and self-propagating, and also to train Africans in Africa to teach other Africans the Word of God. And that's really one of the keys to this mission. The ultimate goal of the mission is to have all the congregations in Arusha, Kasongo, Kilimanjaro, the other areas, to be self-reliant of outside support by 2018. So they have a big year planned for 2018 where their goal is to start turning this work over to the local congregations and the local people. Now, I think it's still to be seen whether they'll be able to be totally self-supporting. But as far as leadership, they've already started that process. So the American missionaries are starting to pull back more and more in some of the local congregations. One of the more established congregations in the city of Arusha, hopefully within about a year, will have elders established, which would be the first elders in a congregation of the church there. But a main focus of this mission is for these congregations to be self-reliant and self-supporting. In short, if you had to summarize the goals of Tanzania 2000, it would be self-reliance, self-propagation, and independence. That's what they're striving for. Now, a lot of our work was at the Andrew Connolly School of Preaching. So this is the School of Preaching that is in Kasongo. It's a key part of Tanzania 2000. This is a picture of the building, of the campus. It sits on about 20 acres in Kasongo. As you look at the building, you can see it's a two-story building, actually three-story building. You can see in this next slide over here, there's an armed gate or a locked gate that they keep here at the front. That's the entrance in and out. So you would enter this side, you cut across right here, and you enter into the main part right here. So as you look at the school, I had to include this in. our laundry every day, you could always tell. So they do our laundry, and this is where it hangs to dry. So one of the fun parts of the day was seeing which parts of your laundry were hanging from the upper third floor of the school. But it was wonderful. It was washed and ready to go every day. So as you look at the School of Preaching, I love this picture. So this shows the different countries that they pull from for the School of Preaching. So you have Kenya, you have the Republic of Congo, Rwanda, you have Africa, and I believe this is Uganda over here. So those are the different regions where they pull members to come to the School of Preaching. So they take 2 classes at a time. They take 1 class every year. So one year they'll take what they call their English class, which is made up of students that speak both Swahili and English, but they have to be able to take their courses predominantly in English. And there's a series of tests that they have to take to qualify for the English program. And then in the year that they don't take an English, they take a Swahili program. Now what's interesting though is many of those in the Swahili program will speak English as well. So just because they're in the Swahili program does not mean that they can't speak English. It just might mean that that gets them into the school a little bit quicker. So there's always 2 programs ongoing at the same time. Now, if you look within the school, they have a library, they have classrooms, they have a dormitory, they have a kitchen staff with kitchen, they have study areas, they have everything that you would expect in a full School of Preaching. So as you look along this outside wall right here, that would be an example of what the dormitories would look like. So what you see here is a room here and a room here, and then there would be a bathroom in the middle that the students would share. So this is where we stayed while we were there. So Neil and Peyton and Carrie would share a room like this, and then Ashley and I would share on each side like this. So those are the living standards. Sleeping under a mosquito net at night, but very, very nice living quarters. You can see in this next slide, these are the 2 main classrooms. So this was the classroom where Neil spent his week teaching the book of Hebrews to the English program. And then over here, the Swahili program was ongoing in this classroom over here. This is the open courtyard area. This is where they eat their meals, 3 meals a day. You'll see students studying many times in the evening here. If they have some downtime, it's not uncommon just to see students sitting there fellowshipping together. Here's a sample of mealtime. There are ladies that staff the kitchen all week, 3 meals a day that they prepare, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. On this particular meal, it was rice and beans, and what they'll do is they bring it out. These are the main pots. They'll plate everything up, and then they will ring the dinner bell, literally, and the students will come for lunch or dinner. Now, we ate a couple of times while we were there. This is one of the meals that Neil and I ate, at least. The kids chose to refrain from this particular one. What you'll see here are fried fish. All the fish heads were gone by the time we got there, so we had to get a part of the body. This would be, I would classify this similar to grits. It was a type of starch that was similar to grits, and these are greens that they grow there at the School of Preaching. The fish itself was great. I thought the grits were kind of bland, and the greens were good, but not as good as Mama makes. And I didn't have any cornbread, so that was a little bit different. But I mean, you can see that's a good meal, and that's not uncommon. I mean, the ladies there are good cooks, and the students eat lunch and dinner like that every day. So they have their own garden where they grow some of their own food. This is a picture of the garden that's on part of the 20 acres. That's something that the missionaries trained them in. So that was a piece of what the Americans helped with the school over the last several years. They also have a few cows. They say it's for milk. I'm not sure if the cow feels that way or not. If it might start out as milk, might end up as dinner. But either way, they have about 3 cows on the property as well. One of the key components of the work in Tanzania 2000 is to preach the gospel. And we know that as a result of preaching the gospel, as men and women obey that, we know from Acts chapter 2 and verse 47 that the Lord then adds those who are saved to the church. And a key component of the work there is the establishment of the church in this area. And a piece of what we do when we're there is help to strengthen these churches to the best that we can, these local congregations. So we had 2 Sundays while we were there, and we also had a Wednesday night midweek study and a Thursday night midweek study that we were able to help participate in. So this is a picture of the Ile Cure congregation. This is one of the newer established congregations. There's one other that's a little bit newer than this one that I'll share with you in a minute. This one has been established now for about a year. So that's the building they're meeting in, which is a very nice building for them right now. You can see the parking lot is not full because people walk. The only people that drive for this particular Sunday were the missionaries. So this is the Gaines vehicle. For Terry and Roger, they'll appreciate. Doesn't show up very well in the picture right there, but there's your Alabama sticker on the back of their car. So they're big Alabama fans. But this is an outside, a picture of the outside of the building. This is a picture of the inside during Sunday morning services. The man that's leading singing, he's also the minister there. His name is, let's see if I can get this right, Ayubu, which is Swahili for Job. Good man, good man. He translated for us. I taught Bible class on Sunday morning. You'll see Carrie sitting there in the back, and he brought the Sunday morning message during worship. They had about 40 to 50 for worship on that Sunday morning. About half of those were children. And I could not get a picture of this little girl, but one of the things that really struck me for this service, there was a 4-year-old girl who was there that morning, and she had walked by herself for 20 minutes to get to Bible class and to worship at 4 years old. Her mama was home. She had some sisters that were 8 months old that were sick, so mama couldn't come, so had to stay home with them. So she walked by herself for 20 minutes to be at Bible class. And when mama can come, she's carrying an 8-month-old on her back while she walks that 20 minutes with her mama. That's not uncommon. That's part of the culture there. On average, it's not uncommon for most members to be walking anywhere from 1 to 3 miles to get to services, depending on how far out in the country some of these congregations are. There's a picture of a Bible class, and you can see there were probably about 6 to 8 adults in Bible class that morning, but there were probably 12 to 15 kids in Bible class. I like this next picture. It made me chuckle because look at the expression on both me and the translator. He was translating body language as well. It wasn't just the words. He was there with me in spirit. And I can't say enough about these good men that we work with who are translators. These are local preachers, many of them. Now, Carrie's translator was a local member of the Arusha congregation. His name was Nestor, and he just volunteered his time as a member of the congregation. But a lot of these are ministers that work with the local congregation as well. And when we say that these are ministers of the local congregation, it's a little different than what we might think. They're not fortunate like Neil and David and myself are, where they're full-time, supported 100% by the church. Many of them are working secular jobs as well to support their families and to help pay the bills. But they put in a lot of hours. And I can tell you from going through the school of preaching, they know the word. They know it very well. One of the things that was interesting, this was a comment made by one of the missionaries, is they have a very good library, but it's not what many of us would have access to here at a school of preaching for a library. So as a result, they don't have some of the study tools that we do, so they really focus more on the word a lot of times. And they can quote it, they know it. On more than one occasion on our studies with my translator, I would say, hey, this is the verse I'm thinking of. I can't quite it's not on the tip of my tongue, and he'd know right where to go. So he was a good help as well. Picture of Ashley teaching the children's Bible class on that Sunday morning. This was one of the things that she assisted with on the first Sunday she was there. And then one of the missionaries' wives, Tiffany Gaines, helped work with her and the missionary's daughter, Abby, to prepare a lesson, and her and Abby helped to teach the children's Bible class by themselves for the first time while they were there. So that was one of the good experiences for them. Picture of Carrie preaching. He's making a point. He's ready. This is a picture of the outside of the Kasango congregation. So this is the congregation where we were locally. Now, one of the neat things, especially for Neil, he's been going here now for 10 years. So he has seen the Kasango congregation meeting prior to ever having a building when there were about 7 to 10 folks meeting for worship to now having a wonderful building. And then on the Sunday that they were there, about 120 in attendance that Sunday morning. Now, I put this picture up there just because I don't know if you can make this out, but it says, "Put off your phone." So we're not the only ones that make announcements to silence your cell phones. They do that in Africa as well. Neil taught the Bible class lesson that Sunday morning at Kasongo. He also helped to preach on that Sunday morning, and Peyton also preached on that Sunday morning. So that was part of his work at the Kasongo congregation on that first Sunday morning while we were there. Now, the man you see translating there, his name is Ahimadiwe. He is a good man. He's the preacher there at Kasongo, also actively involved with the Andrew Conley School of Preaching. He's an instructor there as well, and does a lot of work. And one of the things that's amazing to me every time I'm with him there, this was my second time, he knows that community where he is at. There's not a time that we go out, we can't hardly go half a mile that we haven't had to stop and talk to several people. So he's a good man that works hard in that local area. One of the highlights to me for worship service there is, this is a picture of it. So what happens when the services are over, if you would picture the inside of the building with these two rows, at the close of services, everybody will stand and they start to sing a song. And everybody on this row would start to exit, and then on this row, and it would work its way to the back. So the first person out, they stop and turn, and then the next person, they shake their hand, and that person stops and turns. And it keeps going until the entire congregation is outside the building, and you have shook hands with everybody that was there that Sunday morning while you're singing the entire time. So this is a picture. You can see it wrapping all the way around the building here in Kasongo. It's one of my favorite things. It's just an unbelievable way to end services. The singing is absolutely beautiful, and you literally greet everybody that was there for worship. A very neat experience as they end their worship service. This is a picture of the Ingerocini congregation. This is the newest congregation. It's been established now for less than 6 months. This is where I was our last Sunday there. The man that you see in the picture right there, that was the man that worked with me as translator that week. His name is Gaspar. He is the evangelist here for the Ingerocini congregation. The congregation is meeting right now at the home of one of the members, and they're averaging around 30 members right now on Sunday morning. Another picture of the congregation. You can see the lady right here. That's Stephanie Stafford. She's one of the missionary wives. Cy Stafford, I mentioned earlier. They've been in this area since the late 90s, I believe, between Shamala and where they are now. Now, that's a little bit about the congregations while we were there. But a large part of our work while we were there was helping declare the glory of God, to declare the message, the good news, the gospel. Now, a key component of the work was following up on what's known as the East Africa Gospel Meeting. Now, this is a meeting that is annual, and it rotates between the countries of Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. And it was in Kasongo, the village of Kasongo, this past year. And in order to host the meeting, if I remember correctly, you have to have actually attended, I think it's 2 out of the 3 previous years, something like that, in order to be considered to host the East Africa Gospel Meeting. So it takes a commitment in order to host this, and the Kasongo congregation was able to host it. But another key component of our work while we were there, and this is one of the things that Neil focused on, was teaching in the School of Preaching. So if you think back to the purpose of that Andrew Conley School of Preaching, is to train men to go back to their home villages, their countries, and to proclaim the Word of God. So Neil, for the week, he taught a short course for the entire week on the book of Hebrews. This is a picture of him in his classroom. 8 to 9 hours a day of classroom instruction. And then it was not uncommon for most of the students every night to have 2 to 3 hours of work that they would work on between papers, preparing a sermon that they were going to teach. So I think the takeaway from that is, don't take one of Neil's classes. I'm joking. He had to cover, sort of. He had to cover the entire book of Hebrews, though, in a week. And the key point I want to make, though, is the commitment that these students have. No question this was tiring on Neil as well. That's a lot of effort and preparation. And And while the students were doing 2 or 3 hours of homework a night, Neil was grading papers and preparing for the next day as well. They covered the entire book of Hebrews, and one of the things they did at the end, and this is a picture of that, is each one of the students had to present a sermon based on what they had learned that week. So that was part of the requirement of that short course. And this is a key component of the work there. So there are other men that come in throughout the course of the year from other areas that help to teach these short courses to help these students as they go through their preacher training. And that was a key component of the work while we were there that week. And Neil put in, the class itself was probably anywhere from 50 to 65 hours over the course of the week. Now, Ashley and Peyton, they did a lot of different things. This particular picture here is they had the opportunity one day to go with Tiffany Gaines, one of the missionaries' wives, to an orphanage. And this is a picture of them as they're holding a couple of the children from this orphanage. So that was part of the work that they did. They spent an entire day doing that one day with Tiffany and her daughter, Abby. And then a key part of our time there was spent following up on this East Africa Gospel meeting. So one of the great things about it for us this past while we were there was we weren't starting from scratch with most of these studies. So the seed had already been planted through this East Africa Gospel meeting. Our work was follow-up. So they had already had about 8 baptisms prior to us arriving there. But our work then was to take that list of people they had that attended this gospel meeting and continue that follow-up. So what you see in this picture here is a typical example of the homes where we would be to have our Bible studies. So this is in the community of Kasongo. And what you see here are some of the typical mud homes, mud huts that we would study at. Now, as you look at this picture, inside a lot of these, you would see a pen area like this where they might have some livestock. They had chickens in this one. It wouldn't be uncommon to see some cattle. Goats are other examples of livestock that you would see. And then this is an example. Each of these doors, that's where people live. So those aren't 3 separate rooms. 3 families would share that. Another example just of the living quarters, and the key takeaway here again is each door, that would be where a family would live. So you're talking about anywhere from a 10 by 10, maybe 15 by 15 room. And what we would do is we would come in to where these homes were, and that's a picture of our translator guest bar. He would go find who we're going to study with, and then as we would start to study, it would not be uncommon for several other folks just to join the study. So people might be coming and going. Here's a picture of Kerry as he's conducting one of those Bible studies. One of the key things that Ashley and Peyton would do for us during these studies is it wasn't uncommon for there to be anywhere from 5 to 10 children potentially in these studies. And they would come and need something from mama, and it would be distracting for them as they were trying to study. So Ashley and Peyton would help with those children so mama or daddy could focus on the particular Bible study. Had to put this one in here too. Roger and Terry will like this. So here was the picture of our translator guest bar. You can see he's got his Alabama shirt on. I at least tried to have the Georgia colors represented, but there you go. I can't say enough good about guest bar. Just a joy to work with, and one of the highlights of the trip to be able to meet him. But you know, the reality is the work that we do there, it's God is the one that's really doing the work, and He's the one that gives the increase. And that was the great thing about the week. So we had a total of 13 baptisms through the week. Just a few pictures of some of those baptisms. We did not get to witness many of those because as someone would want to obey the gospel, there would be someone there to take them back to the school to be baptized, and we would head straight to our next study. And one of the things to keep in mind, you can see number one, the baptistry's outside. It was a little bit cooler for the time of year while we were here. So this was not just an easy process because you had the cool weather, and then culturally, a lot of the local people there are scared of water, especially being submersed in water. That's terrifying. So for them to make this commitment and then do that, there's several factors that are very big to each of them. Just a picture of the baptistry, and then this last picture here. The reason I put this picture in here is this was just one of the highlights of my week. If you see this gentleman right here with the hat on, his name was Joseph. We studied with him on the first Monday we were there, and he obeyed the gospel. The gentleman you see in the baptistry, that's his brother. He went home that Monday and started talking to his family. And that Friday, we were able to go back and study with his brother, and his brother was baptized. And we met his father while we were there as well. And his father wanted us to come back. Now, we had to leave, but the local members were going to follow up with his father. So here's an example of the impact of the gospel. This man obeyed it, and he couldn't wait to go home and share it. And he was able to witness his brother be baptized on that last Friday we were there. It was an amazing trip for us while we were there. Much good was done. I want to read an article that was written, a short article that was written by Daniel Gaines. He's one of the missionaries there in Africa. And we got a question about Ebola a lot before we went. And the title of the article is The Pandemic. There is a disease that is wreaking havoc in Africa. It is causing unbelievable amounts of suffering in those who have been infected, as well as emotional damage to those who love them. Living in Africa, I have had the great displeasure of witnessing firsthand those who are suffering from this disease. I've seen some who are desperate for a cure for their condition, seeking urgently for some relief. I've also seen those who are not yet aware of the severity of the disease. These have no idea what is coming if they don't receive treatment soon. This disease has even made appearances in America and other parts of the world. Efforts to contain it are extremely important, but it seems to spread so very easily. I'm very concerned about what it means for the future. A true pandemic may be inevitable and unavoidable. Untreated, this disease has a 100% fatality rate. Many treatments have been tried, but there's only one that is effective. There was one man who seemed to have immunity to the disease. Transfusions of this man's blood have proven to be a remarkably effective treatment. So far, the only known power for cure is in his blood. Without it, the disease will spread unchecked and result in untold devastation for countless people. It is hard to admit, but I myself have been infected by the disease. I'm happy to report, however, that the treatment has proven quite effective in my life. For this reason, I'm anxious to spread the cure to as many as possible. By now, you realize that I'm not talking about Ebola, AIDS, bird flu, swine flu, anthrax, or any other similar disease. The disease to which I refer is much deadlier and much more widespread. It is sin. All adults have been infected, Romans 3:23. It is ultimately fatal, Romans 6:23. The only cure is the blood of Jesus, 1 John 1:7. And healing can be found nowhere else, Acts 4:12. This knowledge is why I'm an evangelist and why I think you should be too. I don't mean that you have to stand in a pulpit or be on a church payroll. I only mean that you should be doing what is in your power to spread the word to those who are within your realm of influence. If you knew the cure for Ebola, would you keep it from your friend who is infected? How much more then should you share the life-giving knowledge that can rescue others from the death that comes from sin? I'm not afraid of Ebola. I'm not afraid of terrorists. I'm not afraid of poisonous snakes. I am afraid of meeting my Lord unprepared, Matthew 10:28. I am afraid of what will happen to those who do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus, 2 Thessalonians 1:8. And I long and pray for their salvation, Romans 10:1. The world is so distracting. Let's do our best to keep the perspective that comes from setting our mind on things above rather than things on earth. You know, the reality is tonight, the sun will set on millions of people across the world. 40 plus million people in Tanzania, Africa. 700,000 people right here in Cobb County. And the sad reality is the majority of those souls are going to go to bed tonight unprepared to meet their God. I read statistics that say anywhere from 95 to 98% of Christians will live their life and never lead one soul to Christ. Not even one. Now, please don't misunderstand me. I'm in no way standing here pointing the finger. Because I'll tell you, one of the things that the mission trip did for me is it forced me to look in the mirror. And it forced me to ask myself, am I doing all I can do? And I had to be honest, and the answer was no. You know, there's some things that I look at where my focus has been more internal. And that's good. I don't want to change that. I want to add to it. But the reality is I can do more. So the question I have for everyone here tonight as we close, what about you? How are you fulfilling your mission? Just like the TV show, there was a choice on whether to accept that mission or not. And every one of us have that same choice tonight. And it may be that you don't need to do anything more than just privately. Just make a commitment to say, I'm going to do better. But it may be tonight that you're subject to the Lord's invitation. Maybe you're like some of those who we had the privilege to watch immersed into water, to come up out of that water with their sins forgiven, a new creature. Maybe you need to do that tonight. Or maybe you need to recommit your life in a way that you want to do it publicly because we're a family and you want the prayers of your family. I would challenge us all, just look in the mirror and just ask, how are we doing with that mission? If we can help you tonight, though, the Lord's invitation is yours. Won't you come while we stand and sing?